feel quite short, actually. I hardly see everybody over here. Okay, I was going to present first, so a couple of the slides at the beginning are designed to introduce everyone to the concept, so I might repeat a little bit of it, so that at the end of all these sessions, I think we're going to be very clear about the difference between open access, open education resources, open data, etc. What I'm also going to be doing today is a real switching of hats. So I play an advocacy role at my university, so you'll hear quite a little bit of rah-rah OER advocacy work. But I'm also researching in this area, so I'm also going to put in a little bit of caution and highlight some of the challenges that we've experienced at UCT, and hopefully as you move forward in your institution and other institutions, you can keep some of these challenges in mind as you start your open initiatives. So I'm not sure who spoke about the Open University. I think it was actually Eunice. Did quite a long talk around the Open University. So often when we think of open, we think of the Open University, and that really relates more to distance education with more open access. Anybody can actually go in and study the course. So that's that sort of traditional sense of the word open. I have to mention MOOC. Nobody's mentioned MOOC yet. MOOC is at our institution the word of the day. We haven't done any MOOCs yet, but everybody's excited about this MOOC revolution that seems to be taking over the world. But one needs to be very cautious when you look at MOOCs, because although there's an open in the word, in the title MOOC, it does apply to open as in access to absolutely anyone to do these courses, and to a certain extent free, most of the courses. A lot of the materials in those courses are still copywritten. So although you do the course, you finish the course and you walk away and you don't have any materials to take with you. So when you sign up for your MOOCs, be aware that sometimes those materials are actually not yours to use. So the open in the sense of open education is around no cost. But very importantly, it's around licensing. And I'll talk more around licensing later on. But essentially what you do in open education is you allow the user to use your content according to the license that you allocate your work. And it can be quite restrictive or very free with just an attribution. So it has a lot to do with the fact that these materials are openly licensed. So open education resources, Eunice gave a good introduction to them. The key things to remember, so sometimes open education resources are called open content, sometimes open courseware. The key things are they are discoverable online, so Noel just talked all about this discoverability and the visibility, and they are openly licensed. So materials can be shared, they can be used, they can be improved and redistributed depending on the license on the resource. And as my colleagues have talked about, this sort of commons movement that is now existing globally. And it really started off with open source software, where these developers realized that collaboration was the key to a better product. And once they started to do that, they realized, well, we need some sort of licensing on this, so that whoever's new idea is added and the original person gets some sort of attribution. And so these GPL licenses, so it's in the bottom corner of the slide, were introduced. And shortly thereafter, Creative Commons licenses, which are the really key licenses to consider with open education resources. And as we can see, there's open access, open data, open science, open society, and open education resources. So it's part of this bigger commons movement. Just a little bit about a little glimpse of what's happening overseas, and I'm not going into this in a lot of detail. It was really MIT who started first on this journey. And they started in the late 1990s, and the story goes something like this, that the MIT board of directors were having sort of a big meeting and trying to decide how they could make money out of their educational materials, how they could sell their course materials. And after looking at various financial models and options, they decided actually they couldn't make money, and well, what the heck, they would give it away for free and see what would happen. And this is exactly what they did. And this was in the late 1990s. I think the MIT OpenCourseWare was launched in 2000. So 13 years later, they have over 2,000 of their courses online. And it's been a phenomenal success for them in terms of student recruitment, social responsibility, and raising their visibility. MIT started an open courseware consortium, and if you're interested in looking in this area, this is a particularly useful consortium. UCT has joined this. It includes around about 250 institutions around the world, so it's quite a big consortium. They have annual conferences, they have wonderful networking options, and it's helped the University of Cape Town to kind of get into this world of open education. And it's a wonderful world of sharing and openness. We've all been to traditional conferences that are sometimes quite scary, and you're not sure who's going to criticize you, and everybody has their ideas, and these conferences are wonderful because everybody's sharing and everybody wants to share with you, and nothing is too much trouble. So you can also see the University of the Western Cape is also a member of the OpenCourseWare Consortium. We also have OER Africa. I'm not too sure if anyone's had a look at this site. OER Africa produces materials that are made by Africans for African needs specifically. So it's designed for African academics. We have other portals. So if you're going back to your office now and thinking, okay, I'm going to start looking for open education materials, resources that I'm going to use in my teaching, OER Commons is a very good place to start. So it has materials from various institutions across the world, including UCTs. So a little story about the UCT journey so far and how we've done things. So the open agenda at UCT started around about 2007. And it started with an opening scholarship research project. So a little bit like what was suggested around a sort of a what's happening out there, what's happening at UCT, who's sharing and who's doing innovative work. So that was that initial project. It went on to the OER UCT project, and I must mention that both of these two initial projects were funded by the Shuttleworth Foundation. OER UCT's end product was the Open Content Directory, which I'll show you in a minute, where UCT academics could host and keep their open education resource materials. So that was launched in 2010. We also have a big health OER project, collaboration with Michigan and Ghana. And we also have the UCT Knowledge Co-op. If any of you are interested in community work, this has been set up as an opportunity for UCT academics to work with the community. Currently, we have the Open UCT initiative, where we're now looking at much broader open scholarship. So UCT started with open education resources, and we're only now moving into open access, open data, and more broader open scholarship. So we've approached it in a slightly different way to a lot of South African institutions. This happened because the innovators who started doing this work were based in the Center for Higher Education Development, which has a focus on teaching and learning. So the open education resources grew out of that. So this is what our site looks. If you go to the University of Cape Town website, you will see a little icon that you can click on straight through into this open education resource. And presumably CPUT will have something similar, so that the outside world can come right to the interface and see, there are the materials that I know that I can go straight to and use. That's what it looks like at the moment. In the few years that it's been around, we've had around about 178,000 visitors, mostly from South Africa, which is to be expected, 91,000. In terms of, second in line is the USA, interestingly enough. As if they don't already have enough resources, they're still coming to look at ours, which is very interesting. And then in terms of the Global South, India has a 6,010, and they're sort of the leaders in the Global South in terms of coming to visit our site and hopefully using our materials. So I just wanted to give you one or two examples. And I'm only going to give you two examples. I could give you a lot more because there are a lot of really nice examples of the impact that this sharing has had on individuals and groups. So this particular resource was a very beautiful guide that was produced with lovely illustrations around studying at university. And this guide has been used in the Venda University, the University of Western Cape, Stellenbosch. It's also been accessed 5,500 times, which is pretty good. And what they did was to recoup some of their costs for this beautiful publication. They sold this guide to students who wanted a physical, glossy, hard cover version for a small amount, but they were able to recoup their costs for producing this beautiful guide. So this guide is available on open content. All those images are also available on open content. So if you like the look of those kinds of that artwork, you can use that artwork in your presentations. Another example, very interesting example, might be quite a unique example, but this particular academic, Matumo, released her course on open content. And she was approached by a journal who said, "We really like your model. Would you consider reworking your course into an article so that we could publish it internationally?" So what happened here was a resource that was developed in Cape Town has ended up going into a journal which is being made to the Spanish-speaking world, which is being used by the Spanish-speaking world. So quite a phenomenal story, really, of how this making these materials available and visible, what can actually happen. This is a picture of what the resource would look like on the resource site. This is the same one, Matumo's resource, and it's been accessed 1,800 times. And she also won a prize through the Open Courseware Consortium for her look of her materials and her text. Okay, so a little bit around the sort of history of the enablers of OER. And we can see here I've got 4 main enablers, and you'll see later on that this was a way for us to look at enabling OER initially at our institution. And it is quite all-encompassing in terms of covering the key areas, but as I go through my talk, I'll show you there are lots of other areas that one needs to consider. So socially, there was a change in philosophy globally. Technically, the affordances of the internet have made this sharing possible. Financially, there have been a range of different financial models that have come into place. And legally, we have these alternative copyright licensing. And I'm going to talk about these enablers, but I'm also going to talk about some of the experience that we've had at UCT, add in a few quotes from interviews with academics, and also just my sort of general gut feel about what's happening at UCT. So that first enabler, that social enabler, was this philosophy of participation, and this philosophy that knowledge is for society, is created for society, and therefore should be shared. However, what we find is that in fact there's a lack of awareness at our institution. Many academics have not even come across these open terms. And then institutions are not always supportive of sharing. And that's where this policy idea, that's where this buy-in idea is important at higher levels as well. We have that support to a certain extent, but to a certain extent we've also gone as sort of middle management and designed and gone ahead with this initiative with no policy in place. So UCT does not have an open education resource policy in place. And then, very importantly, not all individual academics see the value in this, and they don't necessarily buy into this concept of openness and sharing. Technically, we have the World Wide Web, which is fabulous for sharing openly. However, not everyone has access. There's the digital divide between the global south and north, and often Academics are not quite sure how to add their materials to open resources. They're also not that sure how to look. Where do I start looking for open education resources? And how do I know that what I'm seeing is something that I can actually use? There have been a number of financial enablers. So I spoke about the fact that we received funding from Shuttleworth. We also have some funding from the Mellon Foundation. So there have been a number of models around that. There's a model of membership. So, for example, that Open Courseware Consortium, we pay a small fee for our membership, and that keeps the whole network going. So these are kinds of models. Government in the UK have supported open education resources with millions of pounds. So, and the constraints here are that it's all very well to get seed funding or be part of an international project to start off with, where there's a lot of support, but you need to think about sustainability, how you're going to sustain the project. And will your institution be willing then to add posts and be able to support it? And then legal. So Creative Commons is the foundation of these open education resources, and the more we're learning about from our experience at UCT, the more we realize that it's so important that academics understand Creative Commons. Creative Commons, I'm not going to enter it in detail, and I knew I had 20 minutes. I'm going this is actually really slow. It might feel fast for you, but it's slow for me. This Creative Commons is not giving away your copyright. Creative Commons is a copyright management solution. You still have your copyright. All you're doing is you are allowing other people to use it. If you put your materials onto the internet with no specification of copyright, it is under full copyright, and nobody is allowed to use it without your permission. So Creative Commons, if you put something, if you do your slides share and you have a Creative Commons license at the end of the presentation, people know how they can use that, and it's very important. This quote I thought was really interesting. It was from one of the academics I interviewed. She says, so actually I think you're more protected if you make something legitimately an OER and then somebody else uses it. So there's a case of you've got materials out there that are under full copyright, and people have gone off and used them for their stuff and used them in their ideas and not ever attributed you because they didn't ask you, so they'll just stick them into their lectures. But if you had a Creative Commons license on it, they would know how to do this. Okay. The constraints. Most people don't know what Creative Commons licenses are or how to use them. And when I interviewed academics, they weren't too worried about losing their intellectual property. So they felt that, well, as long as people attribute, I don't mind who uses my work. It would be great if people use my work. But they were very concerned about whether their work included materials from somebody else and that they were infringing their copyright. And a number of academics were very confused exactly. Where there's a grey line, it's a murky area, I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to be doing with this copyright. I do one thing in my teaching, but how do I translate that to when I'm actually sharing more openly? So that's a big thing, copyright, that we've come up against at UCT. Okay, so these factors impacting OER can be looked at in different analytical ways, and I'm not going to get into sort of a theory discussion here, but we have this cultural or social change, this philosophy, structural areas that you need to consider, need to be in place, the technical, the financial, the legal. But there are also a number of other individual concerns that I'll talk about now. One is pedagogy. So traditionally, your teachers used to working within their classroom, their safe space. It's where they've always worked. Now they have to change their practice. So it's no longer just their students and perhaps their peers who are seeing their teaching materials, but now it's the entire world. Many brilliant teachers have a very interactive teaching style. They don't produce masses of course notes necessarily. They don't have PowerPoints. They walk into the classroom and they do something exciting and interesting and run around the classroom and get the students engaged. And that's not very easily translated into an open education resource. So that's one thing to consider. And also finding and using OER. Sometimes it's difficult to find just the right resource for you. And then quality. quality is a contested area, and I saw there was a slide around quality assurance mechanisms here at CPUT and how you're going to look at quality. So there's a general sense quality would improve. If you're sharing your resources more globally, it will improve. It's going to improve. You're going to think about it more. You're going to put more effort into it. Many academics feel that their materials are quite ready to go open. If they're ready for students, they are ready for the rest of the world. And others think that there shouldn't be any kind of quality check. So you don't need a quality check. It's up to the individual. It's a pride of authorship model, which is something we've used at UCT so far. So it's really up to the author to put out their best work. However, many academics are very concerned that their materials are not good enough to be put out there. People, why would anyone want to see my work? I don't think anyone else needs it, that kind of thing. And also, people are concerned about this lack of quality. Some people, that they feel that maybe there should be some sort of quality check. So what we have, in fact, is quite a complex interplay between all these factors, where the pedagogy is also not only an individual concern, but a structural concern. It's also a cultural concern. It's about your idea of what you feel teaching should be. It's about what your institution's idea of teaching should be. There are also quality issues that are related to your ideas of what quality is, and structural ideas if you're going to have some sort of quality check. And very importantly is that notion of the individual believing in this idea of sharing, and I've said it before, and I think it's really important. Okay, so why are we doing this? I've given you all these concerns, and I'm trying to give you a very realistic picture. So this is more the advocacy stuff, I think. So that we have all these global challenges in higher education. Increasing demand for education, increasing cost, increasing competition for places, variable quality in teaching in those institutions, and for us here in the global south, asymmetrics of power and wealth and curriculum from the global north. In South Africa, we have big challenges. I'm not going to get into this too much. A crisis in basic education. If anyone's interested in those areas, Siyavula is doing the most phenomenal work with free textbooks, working with the government to get those on the official government list. And now we have free textbooks available in South Africa. And then in higher education, graduates of different ability, higher education institutions of different variable quality. And so far we have UCT's open content, we have UWC's open content, and also UNISA is now moving into this area. And I see CPUT will be following shortly thereafter, and Stellenbosch, and everybody, I imagine. This is where we're going. We just need to be very realistic about how we approach it and what we need to put in place for it to work. So why now for departments? And this can also be why now for institutions. And Noel did this fantastic presentation on you as an individual, and some of this might be repetitive because it is along the same lines. So it's about visibility. It's about attracting students and resources. So you're putting a sample of your teaching materials out there, and you teach first-year chemistry. And students, high school leavers, can go and have a look what first-year chemistry looks like. They can compare our first-year chemistry to UNISA's first-year chemistry. Oh, can they do it? Do they want to do chemistry at all? They might not want to. They see how difficult it is. You know, it's these kinds of things that all of a sudden now we have this opportunity to have students come in more prepared and make better choices about what they're doing. Social responsiveness is a key area as well. Why should we keep our teaching materials to ourselves when there are a lot of people who actually need them out there? It's a way of sharing with the community, and it's a way of sharing with colleagues. So improving recruitment, I kind of mentioned, the right students, the right programs. It improves coherence across courses. We find, I'm sure at many academic institutions, academics stay in their office or they stay in their department. They don't really know what the person next door is doing in their course. We're trying to change that and have people work together, but often people are islands. They're in their silos, they're in their areas of specialization, and are not really talking to anyone else. So this is a brilliant way of seeing what people are doing. Archiving, curation, and reuse are also very important, and attracting lifelong learners. So individually, not to repeat too much of what Noel has already said, but from a teaching perspective, this is a way of sharing your teaching and pedagogical ideas. It's a great record of your teaching that you've done. So often we find that our research is very well recorded and archived, and it's in journals, and we have copies of it for this report, a copy of it for this funder, but our teaching often gets lost, and especially if you're handing over to somebody else, or you're retiring for that matter, and you've got these brilliant teaching materials and you take them away with you, and they haven't been used by anyone else. It increases the impact of your teaching material, and we saw just with those examples, that example of Matumo's work, that 1,800 people have looked at that resource, plus she's had this journal exposure. Okay, and it also extends the use of your teaching material to high school learners and lifelong learners. Here's just an example of that increasing visibility that Noel was talking about with your Google search. This is one of the items on the Open Content Directory, and here it is top of the list on a Google search. Okay, so to end off, we have this remarkable opportunity to put Africa on the map and put our South African resources on the map. And instead of using resources from the north, yes, we can use them, but isn't it fantastic that we can create our own and share our own and have African content out there for other people? Americans, 21,000 of them are looking at our resources for some or other reason. And I think that's wonderful. So I think this is a real opportunity to get us on the map. If you're interested in this area, UNESCO and Commonwealth of Learning are doing fantastic work with communities. This whole MOOC thing, I know there's a MOOC presentation later on, but MOOC has sort of muddied the waters a little bit and taken some of the press away internationally from open education. But MOOCs also provide an opportunity in two different ways. So firstly, if you have an open education resource that has thousands of hits, perhaps that is something that has an international demand that should be made into a MOOC. And also this idea of the open in this really being truly open and having open education resources as the basis of your MOOC. And then just to end off, I'd like to just read a quote by George Bernard Shaw, which kind of sums up my philosophy and our philosophy, I hope. If you have an apple and I have an apple and we exchange apples, we each have one apple. But if you have an idea and I have an idea and we exchange ideas, then each of us will have two ideas.